my friends, here we are with another book review. Woo! Today I will be reviewing Brotherhood by Mark Chen. I actually listened to this book as an audiobook, which was like the first time I'd done that in like a long time. And I actually found myself really listening to every single part of the story because it was being played very loudly in my ears with my headphones on, because I was listening to it in a format that I don't usually digest books with. For this review, I have situated myself in front of my Star Wars section of my room with my Ahsoka shrine and my Star Wars bookshelf behind me, because I thought that was appropriate, as it seems all I'm reading recently is Star Wars books. So let's get into the review. The story takes place a couple weeks after the Battle of Geonosis at the beginning of the Clone Wars, before Ahsoka, my Ahsoka shrine, I know, before any of that stuff starts happening. The story follows Obi-Wan and Anakin, who are freshly not Master and Padawan anymore, and their struggles with this explosion that happened on Kid Nemoidia, and them trying to figure out what happened and who was at fault, because the Kid Nemoidians are neutral, so there's this whole struggle between like the Separatists and the Republic, and they're like, oh, who did it? Whose fault was it? It introduces a lot of really interesting concepts that are very present in the Clone Wars, and also introduces some characters that are awesome. One of the like cool things about this novel is that it's the first time that Anakin and Obi-Wan encounter Ventress. Now, if you don't know, Ventress is like awesome. She is one of Count Dooku's generals, but she's also like an ex-Jedi kind of Sith lady. She's bald, she's got that going for her. And her and Obi-Wan have this like bickering kind of relationship that's kind of flirting. But I've always loved their relationship in the Clone Wars, and just seeing like oh, this is how it started out and this is how this happened. It's such a good, just a good solid like conflict to start off like their iconic sparring. Speaking of flirting, Disney didn't forget that Satine exists, I guess, for like one book, because in this book they mention Duchess Satine a lot, and because this takes place, I think, before any of the Clone Wars Satine interactions, like before Anakin really knows who Satine is, mainly it's just her appearing on the HoloNet, and then Obi-Wan being like, oh my god, it's Satine, and Dex makes an appearance and he's like, haha, you're Duchess, and Obi-Wan's like, who? Who's Duchess? And it's very obvious that he's like accidentally watching her on the HoloNet at least 4 times. So it's nice to know that Disney hasn't completely given up hope on Obi-Teen, because it's very obvious that he still cares and thinks about her, despite her not being referenced at all in The Mandalorian, despite being Bo-Katan's sister. I'm a little petty about that. It was lovely to see Satine appear again in this book, because I missed her so. I still want a novel really badly that like explores Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in the era that they were like protecting Sabine, wrong Mando, where they were protecting Satine from like the invaders or whatever. I specifically remember a quote about them being on a planet called Draboon, which is like never mentioned again. Like that whole experience is never mentioned again. So I hope one day somebody writes that book. Star Wars, let me write that book, please. Another thing that I really love is that Anakin is fresh off of marrying Padme, and it shows. Like these two are still in their honeymoon phase, and they're like every chapter that's in Anakin's point of view, because it switches between Obi-Wan. Oh my gosh. And one of my favorite parts about Obi-Wan's point of view is that I could literally like hear it in his voice, because like the narrator for the audiobook would like speak in like accents and stuff, and one of the things that Obi-Wan like always like said was like, oh, the context of the situation, and it's just like context just became like this whole word every time Obi-Wan said, the context of this, and it was all about context. Oh my gosh, beautiful cinematic poetry. Context. Every chapter that's in Anakin's point of view, because it switches between Obi-Wan, Anakin, a new youngling named Mills, and a Cato Neimoidian guard named, her name was Roog, and I didn't remember that. I thought it was Rook or something like that, but it's Roog. So yeah, it switches between these point of views, but every single time it's in Anakin's point of view, he's just like, oh my god, Padme. It's like so apparent. It's they're not subtle. It's so obvious. This book also has like a lot of cameos, which is awesome because I love the Clone Wars. It's my favorite era of Star Wars, and it had cameos all across the board. Like there was Sister, who is a trans clone trooper that like was first introduced in another piece of Star Wars media, but I know the creator was like, oh, you know, Sister is for everyone, and so people have been using Sister in other things, and she's awesome. We love Sister in this house. There was an appearance from Cal Kestis, which I think I missed because I actually don't remember that happening, and then I was like googling stuff about the book, and they were like, oh, did you know Cal Kestis met Anakin during the Clone Wars? And I was like, he did? So apparently Anakin is talking to Cal Kestis' master, and then he's like, oh, and his red hair Padawan. I did not catch that, but that's kind of my fault for, I guess, not listening hard enough. Dex. That was cute. I loved seeing Dex and Obi-Wan's relationship. They're like best friends, and Obi-Wan's like, Dex, information please, and Dex is like, yes. Get some coffee. Oh, the other one. Cody. It's there's a scene where Obi-Wan meets Cody for the first time, and it makes me emo, just because. Order 66. Another thing that I really liked about the story is that it showed Anakin in a light that we don't really see, which is like teacher mode Anakin, and he's not a very normal teacher. Even when he is training Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, he kind of teaches her to look outside the boundaries of the Jedi Order, and he does the same thing in this book for a youngling named Mills Alabeth, and I loved Mills. She was so cute. She has a weird connection to the Force, like she has a kind of like a different connection to the Force than a lot of people, so Anakin just like taking her under his wing was like, aw, teacher Anakin moment. So cute. Just seeing Anakin with like the younglings, because they're all kind of like, oh my god, it's Anakin Skywalker, and he's like, oh my god, I don't know how to deal with children. It was so funny. And Anakin is such an unreliable narrator. Like, this guy hates Mace Windu, and you can like feel it in this novel. Like, poor Mace Windu goes through a lot with Anakin this novel. He only appears like 3 or 4 times, and every single time it's like, Anakin, stop. Anakin would have been such a good dad to Luke and Leia. I mean, one of the things I've always loved about Anakin and Ahsoka's relationship is that Anakin knew that she was growing up in wartime, and so he tried to like make war fun for her. And this kind of like transitions into another, like, my favorite part of the story, which was like, the story is called Brotherhood, and it is 100% about the brotherhood between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan like speculates on this, and it's like one of my favorite parts of the book, where he's like, Anakin once said to him that he was like the father he never had, but that like definition of their relationship never like really kind of meshed well with him. And so now that they're both Jedi Knights and they're both equals, it's like they're brothers as opposed to a father and son, and it just makes me so much more emotional after everything that happens with them, because it's like they care so much about each other. Anakin also makes fun of Obi-Wan's mullet, which I think is so sad, and it's like why he cuts it is because Anakin made fun of it, and I'm just like, this novel is so interesting because I think it's low-key the only piece of media that really shows like the opening, or that's like specifically about the opening weeks of war and how the Republic transitioned from being peacekeepers to like official parts of the army. And it was just so like interesting. Like, I love sci-fi politics, and this was a very like sci-fi politics heavy story. And I just think like the whole business with Cato Neimoidia, I mean, like there's a quote in episode 3 where Anakin's like, oh, I saved your life 10 times, and Obi-Wan's like, no, it was 9 times. That business on Cato Neimoidia doesn't count. And it's like highly speculated that this book, the events of this book, is what they're talking about. And it's like, it's just so nice. Like, you can't keep Anakin and Obi-Wan away from each other because bad things happen, and bad things also happen when they're together, but they're able to like get through it with the power of brotherhood. So yeah, I really enjoyed this read. Would have enjoyed it more if Ahsoka made a cameo, but we can't have everything in life. The references to Satine tied me over for a little while. I do really hope that they mention her again someday. I like to think that they're like building up to something with her because they've actively been like denying her existence. I mean, they haven't been actively denying, they just actively haven't been talking about it. Like Katie Sackhoff mentioned in an interview, like, oh, we're not allowed to talk about Satine. And I'm like, why are you not allowed to talk about Satine? What is Dave Filoni hiding from us? So I'm very excited about that whole situation. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning into this review. Like I said, I hope this to become a weekly thing. I am already almost done listening to the audiobook for the next book that I'm going to review. It is Star Wars The High Republic Into the Dark. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye!